On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there is having themselves a great day. The coup is going, folks. It is going full bore. It is about to kick up another notch. Nancy Pelosi is probably going to try to do that today, and we've got some Q drops that talk about it. Got a lot of Q drops that are talking about a lot of really important things right now that I'm going to share with you. And also, real quick, Whitmore apparently had something like 13 people, part of some extremist group, some militant group, and of course, violence is never okay. Never, ever okay. But there's like 13 people that were apparently trying to plot something to kidnap Whitmore from Michigan, the governor. And fortunately, it was thwarted. Trump and his administration was able to put a stop to it, which is fantastic. Now, of course, Whitmore attacked Trump right after, and she's gotten a lot of flack for that. But one thing I wanted to point out, when we're talking about a regular set of Joe Schmoes, people like you and me, that try to put together some sort of bad idea like what these guys did, they get caught. We don't get away with stuff like that. The FBI catches people that do those sorts of crazy things. It's really hard for people to organize in any sort of meaningful way without getting caught. It's just hard to do, and generally speaking, we're very much kept from being able to do that. But when it happens from state level or even higher, deep state level, when there's gobs and gobs of money that are involved, that is when things suddenly start to happen. That is when you start to see some very dangerous things come into play. And that is kind of what is going on. Now, this slide, we've seen this a bunch, and it's recently being shared again. This is post 4833, talking about this helicopter that we saw back in 2018. This is the level of stuff that occurs with the deep state. This isn't even something that Kim Jong-un would do on his own. It requires deeper pockets than even North Korea has, which, by the way, they don't have deep pockets at all. It's like no electricity in the country for the most part. So a lot of very crazy things, and they keep likening this missile launch to the equivalent of what the 25th Amendment was. Now, at first, I heard all the 25th Amendment stuff yesterday, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Well, it's not. I pulled up some information, and folks, it does require all assets to be deployed. It does require a lot of these players that are supposed to be on our side for them to shift to the other side. This would be an absolute, without a doubt, coup. I'm putting a lot of faith in humanity right now, and I'm certainly hoping that we have all of our ducks in a row, which I believe we do. But folks, I think we're about to get our first real taste of whether we're ready for what they're trying to do. This weapon would have gotten us into a war. This one right here would have caused a world war. If it had come from North Korea and then we retaliated in any sort of meaningful way, that would have become horrific. And that is what they are attempting to do with this 25th Amendment nonsense. And it's nonsense in the sense that it doesn't belong in politics. It doesn't belong in what's happening right now. The 25th Amendment was not written to be politicized the way it's going to be, much like impeachment wasn't written to be politicized the way the deep state is doing this. Be on the lookout to everything, because again, nothing is random. Everything has meaning. This is the war of our lives, folks. This is the war of the history of this planet. I hate to keep trying to make it sound huge, but it really, really is. This is beyond just the vote. This is about power over people. This is about dominion, if you will. It's a very heavy duty. Post 4834, now that Russia collusion is a proven lie, when do the trials for treason begin? Now, this is a question like everyone's wondering. Obviously got some of the best players in here. And Gitmo for life, by the way, or Gitmo life, .png is the name of the file, which is very, very funny. So yeah, being brought up, when are we going to see some stuff? I think this is the $10,000 question, the $50,000 question, whatever the heck the right amount of money is nowadays because of inflation. That is the question on everybody's mind. 4835, talking about, of course, we need justice. We are ready. Let's go. Where we go one, we go all, of course. And we are in this together without a doubt. I feel like before Q started kind of dropping the heavy duty, the heavy hitting, the deep, right, coming in, body blows. Before that starts happening, I think he was trying to get us a little ramped up. So this was where I really do feel like we've got all the right people in the right places doing the right things. Pence is going to have to be a patriot. And I'll tell you what, after watching the debate and after everything else, if he's a double agent, man, he's done an amazing job, because I truly believe, like me and my girlfriend have talked about Pence a number of times. He just seems like one of the sweetest people on the planet. Like, to find out anything other than that would just crush my whole entire world. I hope that's not true, because he is going to be the linchpin that is going to have to be in place, or else this could not go well for us. 4836. Was the 25th Amendment arrow in the quiver planned? I mean, you got to wonder, and you're assuming it probably was. And again, I wouldn't hold anything over him. This is from the people that impeached the president because they didn't like him. We actually have come to find that all the things they tried to impeach him for, well, one, where he released the records and the call didn't go anything. It wasn't a quid pro quo. But on top of that, they tried to insist he was a Russian agent. That fizzled out. So just look at the way that the deep state has played this. Look at the way the deep state has attacked him from minute one. Look at the way the deep state never thought Hillary would lose. There is so much at stake right now, folks, for anybody that's a patriot, for anybody that cares about the Constitution, for anybody that cares about First Amendments, and hopefully the Second Amendment. Outside of that, boy, oh boy, they might be off limits, but those first two are tough. So, how long ago do we think they might have planned this 25th Amendment thing? Now, to me, this is hinting at a couple things. One, Trump magically got sick when he did. They blamed it on the Rose Garden thing. It could have been the debate. They're not sure who they want to blame or how they want to blame. But it's almost like they knew that a bunch of Republicans were going to somehow come down with the COVID, and it was going to seem suspicious that it was because of their gallivanting around and their cavalier behaviors, and that's why only Republicans got sick. It seems like it was planned. I think we're getting a hint. How long ago, maybe? I don't know. That's a great question. Probably not too long ago. I'm assuming a lot of things were supposed to happen, and as Trump continued to do these rallies and big momentum, at some point they're like, we've got to put a stop to this. We've got to pump the brakes. So was it expected that POTUS would be in critical health regarding this COVID-19? Again, he came down with it, last Friday, a week ago. They were expecting him to be out of commish. Now, once he became out of commish, that would have bumped Vice President to the position of president if Trump was out of commission. And then maybe the 25th Amendment was meant to come in at that point, and in which case we would have been screwed. So that is the one thing, and we're going to read it. I'm going to give you some evidence here, and they even pointed out for us. That is the one thing that might very well be our saving grace, and probably why some miraculous drugs were given to Trump. And on top of that, there's a lot of rumor and speculation that he's maybe been taking some prophylactics to help with not getting the COVID. Some suggest maybe the one with the CHQ or whatever the heck I can't remember the name of that one anymore because it's so out of the news, and it's probably good that I'm not saying it properly, but the one that everyone wasn't allowed to talk about. He might have been taking that for a while, and maybe that helped his symptoms be negligible to any, and then took some additional Regeneron and all that stuff, and then bam, life is good. So his recovery was not expected. That's what we're telling here. And the way this played out, it's impossible to really unwind how this played out, where it started, but ultimately they can't fix this now. They can't, because he's almost immune to the disease to a degree, possibly anyway, but there has been studies that suggest that you get that sort of that immune response to it, and that your body does start to create a database, if you will, on this particular virus, so you don't get it again. It's like the flu. You don't usually get the same virus again, and if you do, it's usually weaker, and at some point you don't get it anymore. So they can't undo what's now happening. Trump is out. He's going to start having rallies. He's talking about maybe having one Saturday. He's talking about being back out on the road, which is awesome. Next, the mentally incapacitated regarding COVID-19 language. They've been saying this. They've been trying to talk about how maybe with all these meds he's on, he's talking like a crazy man. It's just this constant rigmarole of we just make accusations. Now, this has brought me up, and this the other thing that reminded me of Whitmore. Whitmore said that Trump has been and this is what the press has been saying too, that since Trump had been so hard on Whitmore, since he's been so negative and derogatory towards Whitmore, that is why this plot was put into place. What really is funny to me is how whenever it is anything that's towards the deep state players, it's not okay. You can't say anything, you can't point fingers at me, you can't question what I do, but they can do the exact same thing they're accusing Trump of to Trump. Trump is accused of everything under the sun every single day. That's apparently okay. It is completely contradictory to what they're yelling at Trump for doing. The hypocritical aspect of the deep state is beyond word, and I'm hoping that is one of the things that the sheeple are seeing. Because that is the thing that just drives me insane. I'm sitting here at home just going, why? And I'm sure Q's doing the same thing. Why the hell don't more people see this? And I'm assuming that way more people see it, the silent majority, way more people see it than the polls would say, that the news would tell us, right? That way more people are out there. And again, I've talked about the little slip that Scarborough had the other day on the news when he said 100 million people are supporting this nut job. Like, he couldn't believe 100 million people are following this guy. And when I looked it up, I'm like, how many registered voters are there? There's 152 million registered voters as of 2018. 100 million would be 2/3 of that. That would be a giant majority. And so I think they might have slipped and dropped their cards a little bit to show us, oh no, things are actually way, way, way worse for them, the deep state, than they even let us on to know, right? Like when they talk about the polls, Trump's behind by 10 points, when the reality is Trump's ahead by 2/3 of all registered voters, it seems anyway. So again, they're talking about combat tactics. They knew the playbook was coming. Now, I don't know if they picked up communications. I don't know how they saw the 25th Amendment. I mean, maybe they just know, and maybe they knew that was really the only other way. I mean, I guess these people that are constitutional scholars probably know all the crazy ways that you can try to mess with somebody. So maybe they saw it coming. I don't know. I'm not one of those people, so I didn't see this coming for sure. But that doesn't mean anything. So again, kind of crazy what's going on, but of course she was dropping the hints. I'm not going to play any videos of her saying it. First off, I don't like her. Second off, her eyebrows. I can't help but make fun of her crazy eyebrows. I hope every time you see her eyebrows, you think of what I have said about her eyebrows. 4837, never bring an arrow in a quiver to a LOSBR, or a line of sight beam riding missile fight. And that's truly what's going on. Now, of course, they show the missile over here. Maybe that's supposed to be part of it. That would be a guided missile, so maybe it's not really a beam rider. I think that's typically infrared or whatever, but it is what it is. So we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now, but the fact is we have a big challenge in our country. Yeah, we have a deep state trying to attempt a coup of our government, and everybody, as far as the media and as far as all these other places are on board, are definitely trying to help out. So did you notice the missile within the drop regarding the 25th Amendment? Missile, quiver, arrows, COVID arrow, PNG. We're going to see how it plays out. Again, I think this is something that could start like it's like the level of a global war. What is going to change on this planet if Biden is elected is off the charts. Now, this is the 25th Amendment. The only real part of this I think that matters is Section 4, and I really want to focus on this for a couple minutes here. So whenever the vice president and a majority, first I just want to state, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or such other bodies as Congress may by law provide, okay, so if the vice president and a majority of the executive staff and a majority of Congress all say the president's crazy, they can enact Section 4 and essentially force the president to have to step away. So what happens if that happens? So let's see. When the president transmits, so after they basically say, hey, you're not fit to run, the vice president would immediately assume the powers and duties of the office of the acting president. Now, after that happens, the president transmits the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists. So this is, what happens here is if the Vice President, Congress, and a majority of Congress, 2/3 I believe, and a majority of his executive branch all say, you're crazy, immediately what happens is the vice president is in charge. Now, at that point, the president can say, all right, I disagree. I don't think an inability exists. Once he gives that handwritten declaration to the Speaker of the House, the tempore of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House. Now, I can see her closing down Congress, so there's no way to do this. That's one thing if this was able to happen. But all that being said, all he has to do is, in writing, hand it back to them, and he instantly shall resume the powers and duties of his office, unless the vice president, and this is where it gets interesting, unless the vice president and a majority of either of the principal officers of the executive department or of such other bodies as Congress may by law provide, transmit within 4 days to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. So, after the president says, ha, I'm taking the presidency back, all of those same people can then go, no, we're taking it back away from you. So thereupon, Congress can decide the issue at that point, assembling within 48 hours of that purpose. So the president puts his thing in, all these other people say, hey, I still think the president's crazy. At that point, Congress is supposed to get together, and they would assemble within 48 hours for the purpose of the session, basically would be to try to pick a president, right? So if the Congress within 21 days after receipt of the letter written declaration, so it looks like they could go up to 21 days after kicking him back out. If Congress is not in session within 21 days of Congress is required to assemble, this would be determined by 2/3 vote of both the House that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. It's both houses, I'm sorry. So 2/3 of both houses would have to agree. So a Senate, I think, is still a block. But they'd have to basically come and vote that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. And at that point, the vice president would continue to discharge the same as the acting president. Otherwise, the president would resume his powers. A little convoluted, I get you. But one, there seems to be this back and forth that can happen, which is a little freaky, to where they might be able to kick Trump out, and then Pence would jump and stay in place, and then there would just be this legal thing going back and forth. Now, obviously, with us missing people in the Supreme Court, or a person in the Supreme Court, not a very good scenario there. But again, it requires a majority of the executive branch of the government to basically say, we think he's unfit. And I think Trump's been pretty good about who he's got insulating around him. Two, it would require the vice president to also agree. Now, if Congress just decides willy-nilly that they're going to have a vote and decide that the president is unfit, well, the House certainly can do their part of it. The Senate still gets their vote, but that's not really how this is supposed to happen. So I feel like the question that's being brought up is, were they assuming that immediately after Trump getting the COVID, that it was going to be a pretty extensive bout that he was going to go through? Did they also figure that they would then get Pence sick as well? Because that's the one place where I feel like something major could have happened along the whole lines of this 25th Amendment. If somehow they got Pence out of the way, or somehow got Pence promoted, but then did it to him as well, right? Kicked him out, 25th Amendment. I wouldn't hold it above Congress to throw two 25th Amendment actions in a row, because now he's acting president. We're like, well, we have no faith in you either. So there's something major going on around the 25th Amendment. Do I think they can pull it off? No. I think we've got stuff in place, all assets deployed, but you see how close we were, how with the greatness of the people around the president and keeping him healthy and safe, and why he probably did not want to stay at Walter Reed any longer. Probably one had to do with the information that they were bound to leak, and two, his safety. I am sure, even though it's an Army-run facility, the Army is not the Marines, and the Army is still maybe questionable in certain leadership aspects. The Army, by the people, are the greatest, and I love all you guys. You guys are the best, but from a standpoint of the ultimate generals and whatnot above, there might be some question. I've heard the Marines are the one place where there truly is some joining with the president, and the other branches can be a little bit questionable. I don't know how that all plays out, but this is what I've picked up on all the research I've been doing. So what happens here? 48-38. What happens if the CIA, and this is a whole other bracket that is really important. Like I said, we got some major juicy stuff today. What happens if the CIA was actively involved in domestic targeting and surveillance of U.S. persons, direct or indirect? This little article they share here, let's check it out really quick because it talks about a few of the myths that people have. One, the first myth that a lot of people have is the CIA spies on U.S. citizens. It's actually not true. The CIA's mission is to collect information related to foreign intelligence and foreign counterintelligence by direction of the president, yada, yada, yada. The CIA's procedures require senior approval for any such collection that is allowed, and depending on the collection techniques employed, the sanction of the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General may be required. These restrictions have been in effect since the 1970s. Now, of course, the reason they say they should be able to do that, and this is, I'm sure, where their legalese is going to come in, the CIA is restricted in the collection of intelligence information directed against U.S. citizens. Collection is allowed only for an authorized intelligence purpose. For example, if there is reason to believe that an individual is involved in espionage or international terrorist activities. And of course, they had it pinned that he was involved in espionage, even though they knew full well that Hillary Clinton was drumming all this up because they found out through their channels that Hillary Clinton was drumming all this up to try to create a bad rap for Trump so she could get some of this email stuff off the radar. So this whole thing stank from high heaven. But that being said, this little section is going to be the critical part of all the myths. Now, some of these, do men and women work at the CIA? Are they all spies and agents? No, they get into that, the difference. They're all officers that work for the CIA. Agents are people that are like in foreign countries that the officers are recruiting. Again, a lot of this doesn't matter as much as that top part. All CIA officers recruit and handle agents. No, not all of them. The CIA is like a lot of places, right? They've got all sorts of different departments, different groups. You got your bean counters to all sorts of, IT people, right? They've got it all covered. All CIA officers are quiet, mysterious, live undercover, and lie about where they work. No, that's not really true. Not all of them do. A lot of the true operatives, if you will, or officers. But those guys, oftentimes you can't get a straight answer out of them. CIA has law enforcement authority, and all CIA officers carry guns. This is not true. The FBI is really meant for our country, within the borders of our country. They do work very closely with the CIA. So again, we've got James Comey working very closely with Brennan. So a lot of problems were there, but the actual FBI stuff is where all the direct espionage, if you will, on American people would happen. In the sixth one, obviously, the agency operates independently, is not held accountable to anyone. That's not true. It bubbles up specifically to the executive branch, which again is why everyone keeps saying Brennan had to come and tell Obama, because this was a big deal. Obama knew. Obama was in the loop on all of this. So, the CIA is restricted in the collection of intelligence information. I read this part to you, right? The only time they can do it is if they believe the individual is involved in espionage or international terrorist activities. The CIA's procedures require senior approval for such collection. That means if they decided to start spying on President Trump, which we know they did, they would have had to have gotten help from above. They would have had to have gotten help from the DNI and the Attorney General. So basically what he's saying here is FBI, DOJ, look here, bleep, 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 shine on the light on the problem. And then CIA, don't look behind this curtain. So again, very important what's going on in this regard. Now, the question's going to come up right here where they reference the same post and they say, who was the DNI and who was the AG? Well, that's very funny. You should ask. James Clapper was the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. James Clapper, probably a name you remember. And what's the name of the AG? Oh, that's right, Loretta Lynch, another name that we've heard a lot about. These people are deep state people. This is the top of the FBI. We had James Comey, deep state. Top of the CIA, Brennan, deep state. The top of the DNI, Clapper, deep state. The top of the AG, Loretta Lynch, deep state. Do you realize how many departments they had? The president was almost the only place, the only position that they could actually shift a non-deep state person in there and then just start busting stuff up from the inside. It is why everybody keeps referring to President Trump as a bull in a china shop. That's why they do that. Because he is. He's busting it up from the inside. Now, one other thing that really jumped out, and it's just in some of the research, there was one of the Anons made an amazing post here. And they're talking about sleepers. And this originally came from the question, someone up here, I think it was this one. Yeah. You trust POTUS. You are watching a movie. Just realize that. It's going to be okay. And this guy responded to that going, sleeper? Sleepers had to be uncovered. We are ready, think bar public, right? The sleepers had to be brought out. That's really important. This guy also brings up, think regarding why no arrests or justice yet. What if almost every critical position, senior positions within the U.S. government apparatus was infiltrated? What must be done first? You have to uncover. You have to find the sleepers. You have to figure out who you can trust and who you cannot trust. The swamp runs way deeper than people realize. Just arrest everybody. Do you realize how many vacancies we would likely have had in all these different positions? It would have been chaotic and catastrophic. It would have been very, very bad. Sometimes a deep state person handling the day-to-day functions is better than nobody handling the day-to-day functions, but obviously you've got to figure out ways to get these people out of there. So backgrounds are important. Also, all assets, foreign and domestic, are being deployed. So some who once supported POTUS, sleepers, have and will turn the puppets and the puppet masters. Again, it's important to know. So control of the narrative equals control of public opinion. Now, it is and it isn't, because the narrative has changed a lot, but they're actually trying to censor some of the narrative, right? Because the media isn't really getting trust anymore because most people think they're a bunch of liars. So control of public opinion equals power. If you get everyone to believe that Democrats are good and they're the ones that want to put money in your pocket and blah, 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 then, you're going to vote for Democrats. Or if you believe that Trump's the guy that actually cares about your freedoms, cares about we the people, cares about the Constitution, which I think any of people that like that stuff realize, then you're going to want to vote for Trump. So everything truly is at stake. This is all about control. This is about who is going to run this country for sure. Is it going to be constitutional, or are we just going to, basically have a communistic situation in this country and let China be the rulers of the world? Because that's basically what we get on the other side of the equation. That's the deep state in a nutshell. So JC tweet translation, I'm assuming that's James Coney. Special Agent Andrew McCabe stood tall over the last 8 months, which meant do not talk. When small people, and he's meaning the sheep, were trying to tear down an institution we all depend on, aka cover, he served with distinction for 2 decades. We own you and your family. I wish Andy well. That's a 187. I also wish continued strength for the rest of the FBI. That's general threat to other people that are out there. America needs you. And that is the activation of the other sleeper cells that are deployed, but maybe not activated thus far. All assets are deployed, and pretty close to probably all of them are activated at this point. We'll certainly see how that works. But his final answer was, how do we know who to trust? And that was the original question up here. Just trust, it's that easy. No, I like this guy down here asking tough questions. That's where I think more of us need to be. It's important. Yes, trust the show, but certainly we all have our part. And we certainly need to pay attention to what's going on around us. And we got to kind of try to assess and figure out who we can trust and who we can't. And that's super important. Now, speaking of people we can't trust, look at that. This one wonderful woman, we'll take it in two steps here. How about that? Mr. Brennan here. Senators, show that you put country above politics. Gina Haspel is a competent, experienced, and highly qualified intelligence professional. Ask her tough questions, listen to her answers, and then decide. But don't personalize her for previous policy decisions or because Donald Trump picked her. What this is a message to all the deep state Democrats, especially, and certainly deep state Republicans. But it was a message to them to say, hey, this is who I approve of. Don't worry, she'll keep your secrets safe, right? Because I can't be here to guard the fortress anymore. You put this lady in there, she will. But don't hold anything against her because Trump picked her. right? So it's the whole BS. So why did Brennan endorse her? Why did the POTUS select her as the director? Buckle up. I guess it's going to be a wild ride, certainly. Now, a couple of these things, obviously, we've read the whole quote from her. So why did Brennan endorse? Obviously, because he can't be there. We needed to keep a deep state person in play, and so that was what needed to happen. Why was it her? I can't fully answer that question. I think they probably figured she was a sleeper or weren't sure and wanted to give her a chance. Not sure. But whatever the case was, obviously they've figured out, especially because she's blocking the release of information, they've obviously figured out that she is definitely a sleeper. And so I think maybe that's because of all the talk of sleepers. That is probably one of the things we're finding out about Gina Haspel. Again, the important thing that people have said is you've got to be able to identify it. You've got to get these people to show that they are, in fact, a sleeper. They've got to show themselves. They've got to expose themselves, if you will, but not in a way that gets you in a database. But who did we have? So John Brennan obviously ran up until January 20th, 2017. I wonder why that was his last day. Then we had an acting, which was Moreau Park. She's a former American intelligence official who served in the executive director, yada, yada, yada. So that's cool. She was in there for a very short period of time. Looked like a whopping 3 days. Mike Pompeo was put in there. And he was there until April 26, 2018, which I think is when he got pulled out of this position, the CIA, and was put into a position where Trump needed to be able to trust somebody. He probably figured out that was someone that he could trust, and Mike Pompeo has probably served and shown that he can. Now, did Mike Pompeo suggest Gina? Don't know. Was that all strictly through Brennan and his nonsense? Don't know. I assume that Trump felt that he could probably trust Gina. But again, as we find out, that's not necessarily the case. I would assume Mike Pompeo's got a lot of interesting feelers and tentacles and places. So Gina might have been put there, and this is my best guess. She might have been put there as a means of trying to ferret out the other bad actors. She would obviously have still kept her ties and possibly might have still continued to try to communicate with John Brennan. And so a number of those things would have been watched, I'm sure. And again, I know people in the CIA are very, very smart about what they do and how they do it. But again, Mike Pompeo also knows a lot of those techniques and tactics. He was in the business for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how these things unfold. Again, today is going to be an exciting day. The 25th Amendment thing, we'll see what they try to do with that. Again, you've got to keep your guards up, folks, because really, and this is really important to remember right now. Oh, that didn't work well. The shield of faith. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. I feel like they're speaking specifically of Pelosi, don't you? Kind of has that ring to it, of those flaming arrows. Thank you, Nancy. Keep on firing, you dirty, dirty woman with very, very long eyebrows. Looks like we've got no other posts right now. Again, stay active, folks. Stay strong. Keep your eyes open. Be ready for anything. Make sure you've got your supplies stocked up at home. All these things are super important. Remember to support one another. Support our friends as they start to wake up. This is a scary time for a lot of people. And a lot of the people that are kind of leaning left and don't realize they're kind of being duped, they're going to start to question these things. There's a lot of people I even know on the left that are starting to ask really cool questions. And they're starting to see some of the problems. Support people, love people. United, we are extremely strong. Where we go one, we go all. It's on the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.